Today we're going to go over the peak, the taper, and unload. There's a little bit of sort of massaging, I guess, for this of when and how and length, and we're going to kind of dive into why is someone peaking, why are you tapering, and why are you unloading, right? These phrases come from the sport world. We want our athlete. Olympics is a great sort of idea. It's like we have this big competition that comes around every 4 years. We want to peak. We want to absolutely get primed and ready for those events as best we can. That's the peaking. And then when we show up at the Olympics, we want that game speed, that game readiness that you peaked for. We want that to stick around for a while. So we have to taper, okay? And then we know as competition shows up and the critical moments like, hey, I can't go and hurt, can't go and sick, I gotta be refreshed, ready, and that is why we unload. And if we use the PST or our official PSTs in some of these very high demanding moments in selection, we see this need for peak and taper. An example too is like, well, yeah, Jeff, but no. Okay, here's going to eliminate any excuses for peak and taper. The last, not this most recent Summer Olympics, but the one that was in Rio de Janeiro. An example, about 4.5, 5 weeks before the Rio de Janeiro Olympics, the World Championship Wrestling was in Russia, right? So within a 6-week window, you have the World Championships of Wrestling and you have the Olympics. So which one do you peak for? So there's a reason you look at that and go, hey, those athletes got to get really ready for this event. They've got to do a thing, be high skill, high acquisition. They got to do it again, right? That's like you see in the military. You always got to be ready, or these critical moments you have to be aware and ready for, and you're always peaking and always trying to do this, really, ideally, and that's what we're going to share about, okay? So we have a peak, taper, and unload program that's going to just go along with this explanation. It's going to give a better explanation of why this is, what it is, and things like that, okay? Essentially, I'm kind of just going to read from this a little bit because the directions are in here of kind of why a little bit, It says, typically we're saying we're going hypertrophy, then we're going strength, then we're going power and speed. Either we're going back to hypertrophy, working on a weakness, or something else. But you're in a peak, taper, and unload when basically, hey, I've got the numbers. Rule one, that basically is I've got the numbers, you've got the numbers to get the scores you are going to want to get on your PST. So that's your first step. First step is going to be, after you finish power and speed and decide, hey, I'm going to go to my peak and taper, right? You basically have the numbers you want, right? That's when you're going to your peak and taper, okay? And then you begin that, right? So once you complete power and speed program for that final time, move on to peaking phase of this program. This is also the time you go and introduce yourself to the recruiter and begin scheduling a MEPS physical. Once you've been cleared by MEPS, you're able to take your first official PST from the time you go see the recruiter and get paperwork started and off to MEPS. You will be in the peaking phase. Therefore, you're ready. Why are you in the peaking phase? So you are ready whenever they give you the official PST date, right? Because you don't know that official PST date until you've gone to MEPS and seen the recruiter and you're like, all right, well, here's your date, right? And that date could shift a little bit, and we're going to go into why these phases are a certain length, and we're able to expand and contract them a little bit. Again, therefore, you're ready whenever you your recruiter says, this is your official PST date, go. If you complete the 2-week taper before you get through MEPS, you can begin the taper. So again, we can expand, we can contract, because the whole idea is, we'll call the PST, you got to be game ready. That's game time, right? That's your first time that we want to perform at our highest level. We don't want to go in with our nervous system crashed. You're not going to perform, right? With that additional stress, you're just not going to perform. We know that. It's not a point of opinion, okay? And so that's what we're really trying to avoid, is because we know people work really, really hard for this. What we don't want to do is that hard work to become this weird, unpredictable detriment. And that's what we're really trying to avoid with this, okay? So again, looking at the peaking phase, what we're thinking like a visual, why the peaking phase? The peaking phase is, think of it, it's your final dynamic effort, accuracy, power output that's like, I need to get ready for this game. And I want to push my body with fair amount of intensity, but extremely high accuracy, okay? And that's what we're trying to do. It's your real final stressor to get ready for game time. And that peaking phase, like I said, it's really a very dynamic, it is a very dynamic power and speed, because we want to be in this. Like, so that's the thing is like, if things go the way they should and you do have the numbers, you're not going to be in the delayed entry program that long, right? And if you are that long, well, we can expand the peaking phase. We potentially even go, hey, if your recruiter's really dragging their feet and you're like, hey, it's not going to happen for 6 weeks, we potentially could go do another week of hypertrophy and then come right back to that peaking, right? We want to stay in this peaking. But as soon as they say, here's your date, you take that date and you backtrack, right, into your taper phase, right? You look at that date, hey, my PST is in 2 weeks. I want to find out, I don't want to start I don't want to have my most stress before that. I want to back out the most stress I'm going to have in this peaking phase, 7, 10, 15 days. And that's why in the program right here, it's saying the 2 weeks power and speed phase is peaking. So you have 2 weeks or a little bit more to play with, okay? So we can expand that, like I said. We can certainly shorten it to go right into our taper as well. So that's what we're really trying to figure out because of that unknown date. Once we have that date from the recruiter, we go, oh, the times are on here. How long am I in the peaking phase? How long am I in the taper? And how long am I in the unloading phase? You just basically do the backwards calendar math from those formalized dates, okay? And then again, like I said, the taper phase is, what we're gonna do is we're gonna keep our game speed and accuracy up real fast, dynamic calisthenics, real quick dynamic power and speed stuff. But we're gonna bring down the weight. We don't want that intensity to be so high, but we do want that speed to be very high. So the taper isn't asking myself to be less accurate. I'm saying I need more accuracy. I need to maintain all this dynamic power and speed because that's gonna give me a lot of durability. This last training dose of durability is gonna come in that taper. But it doesn't mean less accuracy or less focus. It means actually more focus, but we're gonna bring the intensity of those masses down, to bring our weights down in percentage, okay? So the demand for the nervous system is still up, but we're not putting the grind on the body that we wanna have ready and healthy for our official PST, the one that really matters, okay? So think of that as, again, keep speed and accuracy up as volume is dropped, okay? That intensity is dropped. Think of it as fast, very fast athletic PST stuff, or very dynamic and fast calisthenics that are reproductions of what's being tested, right? We want to have that game speed optimal, durability optimal, resiliency optimal. We still want to keep our focus, right? We're just throttling a little bit back on the nervous system, okay? The unloading phase then is, you know, like, hey, I've got my official PST and I'm gonna unload right before it because I don't want to be training intensely up to it. Or it's like you have passed your PST, you've got your contract, and you're going in the Navy in a couple weeks. We are gonna start unloading because you have what you have at that point, and what you don't want to do is drive your intensity and volume way up right before you go in and then show up around that big old petri dish of people that have come in all over the country with all these different germs that you're going to be exposed to. And if you grind your nervous system going into boot camp, you really make yourself really vulnerable for illness, and that's probably the biggest detriment that we don't want to avoid, or we want to avoid, excuse me, and that's why we want to go into this peak, taper, and unload. It's best for performance, and it's best for our health to do this. Because if you have a good program, and you're using ours, you have a really good program. And when you get done with boot camp, the concern is like, oh my God, I just detrained. You may have, but if you had really good training and a good peak and taper going in, your body is gonna want to reflex back to that optimal form of you. So only a couple days out of boot camp, when you show up at pre-buds, and 3 to 5 days later, you feel like, oh my God, I got all the boot camp out of me. I feel amazing, let's go do this. But if you have driven yourself into a into a nervous system like static ball, grinding and worked hard and did stupid cold showers or whatever you're gonna do, and if you do that before boot camp, your body's gonna revert back to that nervous system. And that's the last thing you wanna do is show up at pre-buds with your nervous system pegged. It's gonna be stressful anyway. We wanna show up and have that nervous excitement that allows for us to access our high performance. But if our nervous system is in a down-regulated or maladapted form prior to going in, that's what the nervous system goes to, okay? So that's why the peak, right? That's why the taper, that's why the unload. Yes, it's primarily for performance, and it will drive your performance to a new level, right? When you learn, and this gives you an idea of like, hey, I'm peaking and tapering for SQT or buds. Like there's different phases of it. There's a peak taper pre-deployment, right? There's a peak and taper shifting in between if you really want to get finite. But again, the peak and taper is just you to observe, hey, what's my goal? My goal isn't the weight room or the run or the track. My goal is to be as optimally ready for this PST or this selection. And being smart about it and approaching it the best way is making sure we plug in a peak, a taper, and an unload, because that is how we get the best performance out of it. And we don't show up the day before the PST after some of the hardest, most grueling workouts. When that happens, if that happens, 100% of the time, the people perform lesser than they can and certainly lesser than they expect. So your best friend in training is a peak, taper, and unload, how to plug it in, where to plug it in, and this program lays that out for you of how to plug that in. It gives directions in here on how to expand it, how to contract it, between each phase. So between each one of these phases, it has a deeper explanation of how to incorporate this into your training.